are injured. The latest strikes come after U.S. President Donald Trump pulled back on threats to strike Iran's energy sites for 5 days. Trump cited claims of productive talks with Iranian officials, but Tehran has denied any negotiations with the U.S. Jim Spellman has more from Washington.
Over the weekend, U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to attack Iran's power plants if the Strait of Hormuz wasn't opened by Monday. But now Trump says he is delaying those attacks by at least 5 days, posting on social media early Monday morning about previously unreported talks that are allegedly happening between the U.S. and Iran. He wrote in part, productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East were underway. He followed that up with comments later in the day. Listen.
We have had very, very strong talks. We'll see where they lead. We have major points of agreement. I would say almost all points of agreement. We'll at some point very, very soon meet. We're doing a 5-day period. We'll see how that goes. And if it goes well, we're going to end up with settling this. Otherwise, we'll just keep bombing our little hearts out.
Trump says his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff are handling the U.S. side of the talks, but he didn't provide many details about these apparent talks, including who is involved in the Iranian side. And indeed, we're getting a different story from Iran. Speaker of Iran's parliament posted in English on X, quote, "No negotiations have been held with the U.S. and fake news is used to manipulate the financial and oil markets and escape the quagmire in which the U.S. and Israel are trapped." Iran's Fars news service reported there is, quote, "no direct or indirect contact between Tehran and Washington."
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will safeguard Israel's vital interests in any situation. His statement comes after Trump said he thinks Israel will be happy with an agreement with Iran that will bring long-term peace. Jonathan Regev reports from Tel Aviv.
Confusion around the world regarding the possibility of a negotiations, agreement between the United States and Iran, and Israel is, of course, no exception. Where is this going? Are we heading for a ceasefire? Is it just a 5-day pause? Israeli leaders seem to not know exactly what the answer is. Officials are saying that Israel was notified that some kind of negotiations are taking place. It's not as if the Israeli leaders were caught by surprise by the statements from President Trump coming on a Monday afternoon here in Israel, but it is not exactly clear for the Israeli officials where this is heading. Israel, off record, will be happy to continue for at least a few more days with powerful strikes in Iran. There's an understanding that the campaign will not bring a change of regime, a change of government in Iran, and therefore Israel would like to weaken the current government as much as possible. That can be done with the continuation of the campaign. But Israel understands very well that if President Trump says that this is over, then it will be over, even if Israel would like to see things continuing. And despite the fact that Israel says we will continue with our targets, we will maintain our interests, and Iran is saying that there's no negotiations and everything is fake news. Jonathan Regev, CGTN, Tel Aviv.
Security remains tight in northern Tehran after the U.S. and Israel launched strikes, reducing a residential building to rubble. Sapia Saremi reports from the scene.
Okay, I'm reporting from north of Tehran. You see behind me this building that was struck by U.S.-Israeli forces. The building has been reduced to rubble. It's in north of Tehran. It's an expansive neighborhood. I don't know what it was exactly, but the people that I talked to here, they all tell me one thing. It was a residential building. So people were living here, and I have to tell you, the security atmosphere is very tense. It took me just 20 minutes that the forces let me come inside here because there are now security forces, firefighters, and first responders working here to see what has exactly happened. So even getting here near the building was very tough. I can see many reporters have also gathered here, but it takes them a lot of time to be able to have access to this building. You see it has been destroyed behind me. You are waiting for more information that what exactly happened.
In Colombia, the death toll has risen to 66 after a military aircraft crashed in the southwestern province of Putumayo on Monday. 57 others are injured, with 4 more missing. Michelle Begue has more from Bogota.
A terrible tragedy that occurred on Monday morning at 9:50 a.m. in the Puerto Leguizamo airport. This aircraft was taking off, and we don't know exactly what happened, but just minutes later, if not seconds later, it began a descent and it crashed. More than 120 people were on board the aircraft. Officials are investigating. Let's take a look at what one of the Colombian officials said.
With deep sorrow, I report that a Hercules aircraft suffered a tragic accident while taking off from Putumayo as it was transporting troops. Military units are already at the scene of the incident. However, the exact number of victims and the causes of the crash have not yet been determined. All care protocols for the victims and their families have been activated, as well as a corresponding investigation.
Officials said 114 soldiers were passengers on that flight, and those who are in critical condition are being taken to nearby hospitals. They have to be airlifted and taken in other aircrafts because this is a very remote region. No commercial flights fly out of this airport. This airport is strictly for military purposes. This region is between the border of Colombia and Peru and near Ecuador. A lot of military operations occur there because there are many criminal groups in this porous region of border of Colombia and Peru. And unfortunately, criminal activities do happen there. But we don't know if any of this has to do with the fact that it crashed. In fact, President Gustavo Petro spoke earlier in the day and said that this was a preventable tragedy. And he alluded to the fact that many of the military aircrafts need to be renovated, and that his government, he said, has not been able to do so because of bureaucratic blockades. And so he made a call for the military to be able to modernize their fleets as soon as possible. Michelle Begue, CGTN, Bogota, Colombia.
The Boao Forum for Asia has opened in southern China's Hainan province, marking the 25th anniversary of the annual event. Organizers say this year's focus is on shaping the future through new trends, new opportunities, and new cooperation. A report released this morning by the forum says Asia's share of global GDP will continue to expand, reinforcing its position as the world's primary growth engine. Shen Tong has more from Boao.
The annual conference has just kicked off this morning, and the 2 flagship reports have also been released this morning. Well, it's an annual tradition for the conference to release the reports, which I would say is also one of the most important tasks each year. And this year, I would say the key word for the report is challenge. Well, as the annual report for the Asian Economic Outlook and Integration Progress Report mentioned, well, the economic outlook for this year in Asia is 4.5% GDP. Well, this is actually lower than the 2025 evaluation. But as researchers mentioned this morning at the press conference, this figure is still not bad, as it's actually the 4.5%. This figure is actually higher than the global economic outlook.
Through these 2 reports, it can be seen that despite facing numerous challenges, Asia's economy still demonstrates strong resilience and presents a positive trend and outlook.
And second, the unemployment rate in Asia will also rise to 4.36%. Well, this is mainly attributed by the the technological improvement and AI development in the region. And also, inflation will also rise in 2026, considering the surge in oil prices and uncertainties of the foreign exchange rates. Well, it's not difficult to understand these challenges if you look at what's going on in the world. Well, trade tensions and geopolitical uncertainties are bringing a lot of uncertainties, challenges to the Asian region. And overall speaking, there are several trends being tracked in Asia? Well, first, the regional cooperation is strongly underpin the Asian economic performance, and also low carbon development is becoming a new catalyst for the green transformation. This year, we are celebrating the 25-year anniversary of the Boao Forum for Asia, and 2,000 delegates from 60 countries and regions and 1,100 journalists from 150 media agencies are attending, and the topics such as AI development, climate change, trade tensions, as well as the challenges mentioned in the report will be addressed this year. And also these major economies will be trying very hard to find this common understanding amid these economic uncertainties in the world.
Former WTO Chief Economist Robert Koopman and former New Zealand Prime Minister Jenny Shipley are among the international guests at the forum. They spoke about the economic challenges facing the world today and what can be done to address them.
There's some uncertainty and significant changes, particularly in the U.S. trade, economic, and national security policies. Much less reliant on coordination and cooperation. Asia plays a very important role in terms of cooperation regionally and globally. It's a very large global trading region. I think it's very important that this region, which has benefited so much from global cooperation and integration, find a productive way to build the next stage of cooperation and integration.
I think all of us are very alarmed that the environment that we've been able to rely on for at least 40 years, if not longer, is very much diminished. China hosts APEC later this year. They will be looking to stabilize the region, strengthen the ways in which our rules-based systems, particularly in trade, can still allow our populations and our economies to flourish.
And that is it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching. Chinese Vice President Han Zheng attends a key business forum in Kenya, looking to expand economic and trade cooperation. In Sudan, at least 17 people are killed, 25 injured in West Kordofan drone strike. And we'll look at how Nigeria is fighting the world's deadliest infectious disease on Tuberculosis Day. I'm Beatriec Marshall in Nairobi. Welcome to Africa Live. Also ahead of the program, Nigeria's Dangote oil refinery reports increased exports to Africa as the US-Israeli war on Iran blocks supply chains. And in sports, Kenyan coach Benny McCarthy rings the changes for the FIFA Series tournament in Rwanda. Let's start in Sudan. At least 17 people have been killed and 25 others injured in drone strikes in West Kordofan state. The attack on Monday targeted residential neighborhoods in Lagawa town. In a statement, the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces blamed the Sudanese army, which has yet to comment. The RSF has called for an independent international investigation to hold those responsible accountable. The Kordofan region has become a central battlefield, with the RSF taking over much of the Darfur region and the army fighting to push them away from the capital, Khartoum. Both sides have been accused of war crimes, including indiscriminate shelling and targeting civilians. In Nigeria, where Kwara State Police say one person was killed and another seriously injured when a commercial vehicle hit an improvised explosive device planted by suspected bandits. The Monday morning blast in Woro, in the Kayama local government area, left the driver dead on the spot. Of the two passengers on board, a mother and her baby, the woman sustained serious injuries, but police say the baby was left unscathed. The chairman of the Kayama local government area described the incident as a calculated act of retaliation by criminal elements. Police say the security situation in the area is now under control. And to Ethiopia, where over 1,300 people have reportedly died from hunger in displacement camps in the Tigray region. Over the past 3 years, that's according to the director of the Tigray Social Affairs Office. One of the most affected camps houses over 150,000 people. The local official said the situation is worsening, with aid from the federal government and international NGOs declining. There have been clashes reported in the region between federal troops and Tigrayan forces from last November and January. The region is still recovering from a 2020 civil war between the two sides that killed at least 600,000 people, according to African Union estimates. Around 1 million people remain in displacement camps. Chinese Vice President Han Zheng has reaffirmed China's commitment to expanding trade with Kenya and the wider African region. He was speaking on Monday during a Kenya-China business forum alongside his Kenyan counterpart, Deputy President Kithure Kindiki. Officials say Han's visit is aimed at strengthening bilateral ties and deepening trade cooperation between the two countries. CGTN's Robert Nagila has more.
China's Vice President Han Zheng and Kenya's Deputy President Kithure Kindiki flag off Kenyan goods for export to China on the standard gauge railway. The train will travel nearly 500 kilometers to the port city of Mombasa, where the goods will be shipped to China.
This consignment marks one of the first Kenyan exports set to benefit from China's zero-tariff policy, which comes into effect on May 1st as the goods arrive in China.
Announced in February, the policy grants zero-tariff access to exports from 53 African countries with diplomatic ties to China. The initiative was a key focus at the Kenya-China Business Forum held in Nairobi, with Kenya's Deputy President highlighting the growing partnership between the two countries.
The relationship has grown into one of Kenya's most important economic partnership, spanning trade, infrastructure development, manufacturing cooperation, technology exchange, and people-to-people engagement.
The CEO of the China International Exhibition Center, or CIEC, urged Kenyan businesses to take advantage of the duty-free access to expand into the Chinese market.
We are looking forward to seeing more Kenyan enterprises engage more actively with the CIEC platform to develop the huge potential of further cooperation between Kenya and China.
Kenyan exporters are also optimistic.
Now let us be strategic through deeper collaboration
through the exchange of expertise, investment, and innovation between Kenya and China. We are building long-term partnerships grounded in shared prosperity.
The day-long forum brought together policymakers and business leaders to explore how Kenyan companies can leverage the new policy to grow exports and boost economic growth. Robert Nagila, CGTN.
And for more on the significance of the Chinese Vice President's visit, we spoke earlier to Professor Peter Kagwanja, President and Chief Executive of the Africa Policy Institute.
At this time when there is war going on in the Middle East, a trip like this is very reassuring to the world that business has not stopped. We are going on with the business. So that's a very important message, which is not said, but it's a very, very important message from the Chinese Vice President. Second is that Kenya, South Africa, and Seychelles are China's, best partners in the West Indian Ocean, belt. Kenya and South Africa are now the leading exporters of avocados to China, and they are also the prime destination of Chinese investors as well as trade, as well as tourists. The two countries are actually some of the main recipients, together with Egypt and Morocco, of Chinese visitors. So, and Kenya specifically is on what we call the maritime Silk Road, starting from Mombasa, the inside. So, so these three countries are very, very important. China and Africa as a whole are the best of partners at this time. You remember the 2014 Beijing, the 2024 Beijing summit attracted all the African countries, and that the agreement was done, and that all the three countries plus other African countries are already implementing the FOCAC, plan of action, which started last year and is continuing up to next year. So what that means is that these three countries specifically are China's, have a good relationship with China. They are also China's, trading partners. They are destination for Chinese investors, and they're also a source of products and raw materials for the Chinese, consumers. And therefore, the relationship has been good. The zero tariff, policy from China is basically an olive branch given to Africa at a time when other major countries are basically raising tariffs for African products. Take, for example, the tariffs imposed on small countries like Swaziland, 54% of all the commodities that are going to the US market, for example. And therefore, China has decided there's this time that this is the moment to deepen its economic relations, its trade relations with Africa. Remember, from 1996, for all those years, China has been the leading trading partner for Africa. So therefore, rather than raise its tariffs, it has decided to basically abolish them for those countries that it has diplomatic relations with. What that means for the continent is that we are going to increase our exports to China. We are going to have access to the 1.4 billion strong Chinese market, the largest ever in human history. And we are also going to close the gap between our exports and our imports.
From Kenya, Vice President Han Zheng will also travel to South Africa and the Seychelles. His visit to the three countries ends on March the 30th. There's a growing need for countries across the world to find innovative and resourceful ways to tackle maternal and infant mortality rate. This is among the agreements reached at the International Maternal Newborn Health Conference, which continues here in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. The four-day forum seeks to track the progress made towards saving the lives of new mothers and their infants. According to the UN, nearly 250,000 maternal deaths occurred in 2023 globally, with sub-Saharan Africa accounting for approximately 70% of those. Experts say that while statistics show that more African women are giving birth in health facilities, the challenges driving up mortality rates still persist. Now, funding shortfalls continue to have a profound effect on healthcare across much of Africa. A report by PATH, a global health organization, says many countries are struggling with massive layoffs, shortage of medicine, and problems moving from donor-funded models to national systems. However, as Caroline B. tells us, they're now looking inward, mobilizing domestic resources and seeking partnerships for solutions.
Until January last year, the U.S. contributed nearly 30% of the global aid budget and funded 43% of worldwide humanitarian needs. But then President Donald Trump enacted sweeping cuts, causing disruptions to health systems across Africa. Due to a range of problems, including the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Germany, UK and France also reduced their aid to African nations. A report by PATH, a global health organization, shows that the sudden aid cuts caused massive layoffs, shortage of medicines, disrupted health information and monitoring systems as countries struggle to move from donor-funded models to national systems. 10 African nations surveyed in the report are now exploring solutions to protect lives. Malawi, Nigeria, Uganda, Ethiopia and Kenya have increased their health budgets and committed additional financing for health crises. Tanzania, Malawi, Kenya, Ethiopia and Uganda are exploring partnerships with private firms to generate additional revenue and logistic support. The report says while the partnerships cannot fill the gap left by traditional donors, it ensures continuity of services. In Malawi and South Sudan, governments say they will absorb thousands of donor-funded health workers into public payrolls to strengthen national health systems and reduce dependency on external funding sources. Uganda, Nigeria and Kenya have also integrated some donor-funded programs into national strategies to improve efficiency and sustainability. In Tanzania, Ethiopia, Kenya and Nigeria, governments have commissioned their own studies to identify gaps in various health sectors and assess the impact of donor cuts. But the report warns that if the alternative funding sources do not fill the gaps, it's estimated that between now and 2040, maternal and child mortality ratio could increase by 21%, putting 8 million children under 5 years and over 1 million more women at risk of death due to lack of healthcare services. Caroline B., CGTN.
Well, a maternal health report has just been launched. Rachel Ndirangu, PATH's Regional Director for Advocacy and Public Policy, is at the conference. She's joining us live now from there. Rachel, thank you for joining us on the program. So where does Africa currently stand on maternal health outcomes and what factors are driving these statistics?
Thank you so much, Caroline. It's really my pleasure to join this important conversation from Nairobi, where global actors are actually meeting not just to look at the progress, but also to ask themselves, where do we move from here? So Africa region has actually made progress over the last 2 decades, and it's important to just acknowledge that efforts have been made to lower maternal mortality and newborn child deaths. But despite this remarkable progress, Africa still holds the largest maternal mortality ratio in the world, with sub-Saharan Africa specifically accounting for about 70% of the global maternal deaths and about 50% of stillbirths and newborns. So this really means that each year we lose an estimated 178,000 mothers and about 1 million newborns every year in the region, mainly from preventable causes. So while the leading causes of maternal deaths are known, particularly the medical ones, and they know that they are preventable, there are other systemic barriers actually to progress that we must address. And of course, these are mainly related to inadequate financing, workforce shortages within our health facilities. Mm-hmm. We've also seen governance gaps and also just recurring shocks which we cannot ignore, such as disease outbreaks, conflict, or which disrupt maternal and child health services. So I think it suffices to say that the situation, is also worse in fragile and crisis-affected settings where women and children are particularly at a greater risk. So these are the things that we must continue to address, even as we acknowledge the progress that is being made.
Right. So, Rachel, you know, Africa has been significantly affected by foreign aid cuts. How has this impacted maternal and infant mortality rates, and how are countries in sub-Saharan Africa responding to reduced donor funding to protect the health of women and children?
Yes, indeed. External funding for health, particularly in Africa, has been on the declining trend in the past year or the past decade. But of course, last year saw quite a drastic reduction. And this analysis by PATH in 10 countries just showed that, an estimated reduction of up to 50% external funding to maternal, newborn, and child health. This means that, this is leaving and has left a major gap in maternal health services. And so it just means that, it just translates into risks for women and children, the risk for death and risk for child survival. And so this is where we need to be thinking about how do we adapt. And of course, countries have been adapting in different ways.
And already Ethiopia and Tanzania have seen positive outcomes in the health sector by adopting different funding and training methods. So looking ahead, what innovative approaches can governments adopt to safeguard and expand maternal and child health services?
Thank you. I think countries are really not standing still. A lot of countries are actually looking at their own financing mechanisms and just rising to the clarion call to increase domestic financing. So we are seeing countries actually coming up with new models and financing frameworks. I can speak for Kenya, being here in Nairobi, where the government is actually working on a new financing framework just to ensure that there's sustainability and predictability of funding. We have seen also, reprioritization of allocations of funding. So it's not just mobilizing more money, but also looking at where do governments and partners need to put their money, particularly where we know that they are effective and high impact interventions, particularly for women and children. We have also seen actions to improve efficiencies in the way services are delivered. Of course, this is driven mainly by the primary healthcare services and systems that need to be strengthened to enable, for example, integration of services and just leverage, existing systems to provide services across the board. And also, we've seen stronger accountability and data use coming up very strongly to ensure that every decision is informed by data. And so I think these are some of the ways in which governments and partners can start making and continue to make in order to advance, sustaining the progress and ensuring that we are accelerating our goals towards the maternal and child health.
All right, Rachel Ndirangu joining us there via Zoom. Thank you. Well, every year on March the 24th, the world marks World Tuberculosis Day, a reminder that one of the world's deadliest infectious diseases is still very much with us. This year's theme, Yes, We Can End TB, is a call to move from promises to action. In Nigeria, experts say it's very much a call that needs to be heeded, with children often the ones who are suffering the most. Kelechi Mekalam reports.
Aisha Peter and her 7-month-old baby Ibrahim prepare for a routine hospital checkup. Aisha was diagnosed with tuberculosis months after she began feeling persistently ill. Not long after, her baby also contracted the disease. Today, both mother and child are on treatment, a strict drug regimen that lasts about 6 months.
I was always weak and coughing. I didn't know it was tuberculosis. When the doctors tested my baby and confirmed he was positive, I was heartbroken. I'm thankful we are now on treatment, and I'm praying we both recover fully.
Her journey has not been an easy one.
The mother was actually admitted critical in the ICU because she was highly emaciated and all of that. So in the process, we investigated and discovered she was positive. Subsequently, the baby too was actually malnourished, looking sickly and all of that. And then we started to run a test as well because the baby was also coughing and weight loss. So we ran a test with the stool of the baby, and that was how we picked that the baby was positive.
TB is an airborne disease contracted through an infected person who coughs, sneezes, or even speaks. Children are especially vulnerable and harder to diagnose. In Nigeria, an estimated 510,000 new TB cases are recorded annually, with about 61,000 infections among children aged 0 to 14. The country accounts for nearly 5% of the global TB burden, according to the World Health Organization. Experts say symptoms in children often look like common respiratory infections, making many cases easy to miss.
I can tell you, most doctors, childhood TB will not be the first choice when we say the child is about respiratory tract or respiratory tract infection. It's only when they have tried and nothing is working that their mind will start going towards that direction.
Delayed diagnosis can make treatment more complicated, and doctors say early detection changes outcomes.
So if detected early, TB is very treatable.
For families like Aisha's, awareness is now part of survival. An indication that World Tuberculosis Day is not just about statistics. It's a stark reminder that behind every number is a family fighting to breathe easier. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Let's now take a look at your business news. Here's what's ahead. Nigeria's Dangote oil refinery reports increased exports to Africa as the US-Israeli war on Iran blocks supply chains. And a helping hand for Congolese refugees in Burundi through chicken farming. Oil prices surged again on Tuesday amid supply concerns. This comes after Tehran denied any talks with Washington, contradicting U.S. President Donald Trump, who said a deal could be reached soon. Brent futures rose 2.9% to $102.83 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediates climbed 2.8% to $90.62. Crude futures dropped more than 10% on Monday after Trump ordered a 5-day delay on strikes on Israel's power plants. Notably, the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran has all but halted shipments of about 1/5 of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas through the Strait of Hormuz. However, 2 tankers bound for India sailed through the strait on Monday. Nigeria's Dangote Petroleum Refinery has ramped up gasoline exports across Africa amid disruptions to energy flows due to the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. Data from tanker tracking firm Kepler show Nigeria's exports of clean petroleum products have risen to about 214,000 barrels per day so far in March, from an average 100,000 barrels per day in February. Shipments to other African countries have climbed to about 90,000 barrels per day from 38,000 barrels per day. The 650,000 barrel per day Dangote refinery has sold 12 cargoes of premium motor spirit, totaling 456,000 metric tons on a free on-board basis to international traders. The sales mark Dangote's first exports of gasoline since the plant reached full capacity in February. Ship refueling companies along Africa's coast are seeing a surge in business as more vessels divert around the Cape of Good Hope. This comes as the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran reshapes global shipping routes and boosts the continent's role as a bunkering hub. Major container carriers include Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd and CMA CGM. And they said this month they are rerouting vessels around Africa's southern tip. The detours extend voyage times but allow vessels to refuel at emerging African supply points, accelerating investment by fuel suppliers and trading houses. Existing bunker supplies in Africa, such as Denmark's Mojasa, have reported stronger demand in recent years, while new entrants, including Vital, Bunker Partner, Peninsula, Flex Commodities and Global Fuel Supply, have announced expansion plans. Kenya Airways says demand for seats on its flights have surged following disruptions caused by the US-Israeli war on Iran. The move pushes the airline's load factor close to 100,000 from about 70,000 in January. Acting CEO John Kamal says some long-haul routes were recording more than 90% occupancy, with most of the additional traffic coming from Europe, the US and Asia. He adds that the rise came during what is normally a low season for the airline. Kenya Airways currently has about 56 days of jet fuel supply and is seeking additional volumes from India.
Low season means your cabin factor percentage is about 70%, 71, 72%. And we were like this in the first January until February. Then it significantly increased. We reached up to 90%. We do the fuel procurement usually through AFRA. So the fuel procurement is done for all the African Airline Association. So they fight because, you know, when you have a more quantity, you get a better price.
And now to Cote d'Ivoire, where the government is coming under increasing pressure to defend a decision to cut farm gate prices for cocoa. The West African country is the world's largest producer of this commodity, but uses measures to protect farmers from volatile international prices. However, critics say the authorities often abuse this system for political gain, much to the detriment of the producers. CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar reports.
For nearly 2 decades, Toily B. Erie Lambert has tended cocoa trees on his 5-hectare plantation. But this season, the 81-year-old farmer and millions more like him are reeling from a sharp price reversal. Earlier this month, Ivorian authorities fixed the mid-crop farm gate price at 1,200 CFA francs, equivalent to just about $2.11 per kilogram. It's a steep 57% reduction from the main season's historic high of $4.93 that sought to shield producers from wild market swings, which have tumbled. Lambert says drastic price cut has left him financially strained.
Logically, I should have earned 4.2 million CFA francs. That's around $7,394. But I only got 2.5 million CFA francs because the official price wasn't enforced. That's a massive loss. Now with the price at 1,200, local buyers are offering just 1,000 CFA francs. The government must intervene to protect farmers. The price monitors are corrupt and working with buyers in this fraud.
As the government defends its latest price shift, producers point to an earlier promise by the Coffee and Cocoa Council. To help cooperatives overloaded with high-cost inventory, the council promised in January to buy up to 100,000 tons at premium rates. But cooperatives say that relief has not yet arrived, leaving most of them with no outflow and cash strapped.
I purchased at 2,800 CFA francs, often on consignment, as cooperatives typically do. The price has now fallen to 1,200. I hold about 10 tons with no buyers. I urge the government to show flexibility and buy back old stock at 2,800 to relieve our difficulties.
Experts argue the regulated price model has clear flaws.
It is the producer who really needs defending, and there's nothing wrong with offering producers a good price, but the danger lies in that price becoming a political tool so that people say thank you to the president. That's what's dangerous, if it fails to take certain realities into account. And this is evident in Cote d'Ivoire with cashews and cocoa. It is in election years that political pricing takes place. So buyers who are used to low prices become observers and do not rush to buy when the farm gate price is high.
Supplying nearly 40% of the world's beans, cocoa is the lifeblood of Côte d'Ivoire's economy. For millions of producer families, it's the difference between stability and struggle. The government says its policies are designed to support them, but many are wondering if it's really on their side. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
In Burundi, Congolese refugees face dire conditions, from limited jobs to stretched aid. But one local organization is offering hope through hands-on training in chicken farming, helping urban refugees build income and independence. CGTN's Wanja Mungai has the details.
Burundi hosts over 200,000 refugees from the conflict-hit DRC. Many of these arrived late last year from the volatile eastern region, worsening an already overstretched system. Jobs are scarce even in the capital, Bujumbura. Mangwanet is stepping in to help.
We realized that many people who had left the DRC to seek refuge here had no work. They came here and stayed without doing anything, resorting to begging along the way. We saw that it will be better to think of doing something useful that will enable them to have an income-generating activity, something that will help them earn money, look after their children and look after themselves. So we first thought of this chicken rearing program to help them. We want to reduce their dependence on other people. We want urban refugees to be self-reliant and to stop depending on others.
Sarah Lurian tried chicken farming before but lost her birds due to poor hygiene. She's now learning the right way.
I've already tried raising laying hens with the aim of having lots of them, not to eat them, but rather to make money. But the mistake was that I paid less attention to hygiene. I didn't care about the way I gave my hens dirty water.
Mangwanet gives training and a few starter chicks, but resources are limited. At the end, about 20 trainees got chicks to start small farms.
We cannot support them in every possible way when it comes to chicken farming. That is beyond our means and capabilities. But in other areas such as training, we can help. However, with the little we have managed to provide them with a small number of chickens, even though it is not enough.
For Congolese refugees, this chicken farming training is giving them a small bit of hope and independence in a foreign land. And with more donor support, Mangwanet says it expands its operations and help many more refugee families stand on their own. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Kenyan coach Benny McCarthy rings the changes for the FIFA Series tournament in Rwanda.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Let's start your sport with some football news and the international window. Kenya's Harambee Stars left the country this morning for the short trip to Rwanda for the 2026 FIFA Series. Head coach Benny McCarthy confirmed the travelling squad of 23 following a number of changes. The adjustments came after 10 players were ruled out due to injuries. Qatar-based striker and captain Michael Olunga and seasoned left-back Eric Marcelo Ouma are notable absentees. McCarthy and recalled Tranmere Rovers midfielder Zek Obiero spoke after the final training in Nairobi on Monday.
What we're try to do now is build for the AFCON team. So we want to get the strongest possible players that we have out there. Kenyan heritage players that plays in strong leagues. And that basically was the purpose for this because, we're playing against Estonia. And then if you win, you play the winners of Rwanda and Grenada. So it's a nice little opportunity for us to rectify and make people forget about our last result.
Yeah, it's just giving me confidence, believing in who I am, believing in what I can do, and obviously Benny showed trust in me to bring me here. So yeah, I'm just ready to get going.
Well, what is the FIFA series? Well, it is a series of friendly matches for men and women that are contested by national teams from different confederations who would not normally have the opportunity to play each other. It is expected to be run in